Kagurabachi's Hiruhiko has been a key player for the Hishaku since being introduced during the Swordbearer Assassination arc. As a contemporary of Chihiro's and the one contracted with Kumeyuri, he's been set up nicely as one of the more interesting villains of the story. In a shonen with absolutely no shortage of great antagonists, Hiruhiko still manages to stand out for a variety of reasons I'll be getting into in this video. Coming off the heels of losing to Samura in embarrassing fashion, failing to make Chihiro acknowledge him, and losing Kumeyuri in the process, I think it's safe to say that Hiruhiko has hit rock bottom, especially when you look at the last time we saw him. I mean, bro really went out sad. After talking a big game, he was literally cut down, disarmed, and left on his ass crying. Dude got humbled real quick. At the same time, I was nearly convinced that he was done. He played his role as a secondary antagonist of the arc, and that was it for him. He was about to die at the hands of Samura. Except, he doesn't. Hiruhiko barely manages to escape thanks to Todo, who seems to be someone that knows him well. And the more I sat on it, the more I began to think, oh, this dude's gonna come back, and probably worse than ever. Of course, that's only speculation, right? But I want to look at everything we know about Hiruhiko to try to predict what we can expect from him later in the story. His mentality, his abilities, and his desire to connect with Chihiro are the primary aspects of his character I'd like to dissect. Being introduced in the third arc, he immediately establishes himself as a more than formidable opponent in the story. There's a reason why it was Hiruhiko who was sent to intercept Chihiro, Hakuri, and Uruha, and he set the tone, not being afraid to go at an Enchanted Blade wielder just to get to his target. After meeting Chihiro, Hiruhiko becomes infatuated with the idea that they are the same. The stage is set when they clash at the theater, and Hiruhiko makes Chihiro realize that to the people around them, they're both nothing but monsters. Despite just meeting Chihiro, Hiruhiko insists that he's the only one who can understand him. He was hell-bent on making Chihiro realize that he's no hero, but a monster, just like him, and at his core, no different than the Hishaku. What Hiruhiko didn't know was that Chihiro had already come to terms with that, and settled with the idea of refraining from causing harm to others, and just drag the Hishaku to hell with him. For Chihiro, not all killing is the same, and it's that sort of ideal what he clings on to when his philosophy is challenged. Because either way, if becoming a killer is what it takes to take down the Hishaku, then so be it. This is why I believe that, thematically, Sojo laid the groundwork for what Hiruhiko now embodies, given that both essentially tell Chihiro to look in the mirror. And I think that there are more parallels between the two and their clashes with Chihiro than I originally thought. Because not only does Hiruhiko take this idea of wanting to connect with Chihiro to the next level, but it's interesting how just like Chihiro had to acknowledge where Sojo was coming from to solidify his own conviction, it is Hiruhiko who had to do the same when he first loses to Chihiro in the theater. Of course, Hiruhiko is deluded as hell and has a real warped perception of what friendship looks like. I mean, I would expect as much from a guy who caught his first body at 3 years old, biting a man to death in self-defense after he was assaulted. Not only that, though we don't really know a lot about Hiruhiko's upbringing, we know that since that moment, the bloodlust became etched in his bones, and he's never really viewed anyone around his age as a true peer. Given these tidbits of information and what we know of the Hishaku, we can imagine what type of environment Hiruhiko came up in, especially when it's clear that he's been carefully groomed by Yura, who's well aware of Hiruhiko's gifts and therefore what works as a good learning experience for him, like we see in chapter 54. He gave him full control on how to tackle the assault on the Sanso fortresses and essentially opened the door for him to be the first Hishaku to wield an Enchanted Blade, knowing he would master it quickly, and so he does. I think it's important to keep this in mind because though we don't really know anything about Yura yet, I have a sneaky suspicion that he sees a lot of himself in Hiruhiko. And the only piece of evidence I really have to back this up would be when Kaguri, when first introduced, actually compares the two and complains about both having the same tendency to take risks. Even when Yura wanted Kaguri to teach Hiruhiko the art of the sword, he lets Hiruhiko do as he pleases after he brushes off Kaguri, saying he's an intuitive learner. In fact, Kaguri is actually reminded of this when dueling against Chihiro, and Chihiro has the same approach. Back to Hiruhiko, Yura recognizes that he's at his best when he's able to operate freely, lean on his instincts, and learn from his mistakes. It's why I believe there's a lot to take away from how Hiruhiko responds to his first L at the hands of Chihiro. I mean, dude wasn't afraid of going at him with just his innate blood crane sorcery, and when he loses, he takes it in stride and pretty much says, "Bet, let's go again." After losing both arms, he was really willing to wield Kumeyuri with his teeth, which in itself is pretty insane. But more than that, it says everything we need to know about Hiruhiko's character. He instantly cements with his actions that he's determined to match Chihiro's tenacity. He's not necessarily driven by any larger-than-life ideal like Kyora and Sojo were, yet it doesn't hinder his perseverance one bit. Hiruhiko is more akin to an exceptionally gifted child who learns and grows at a ridiculous rate once he's out in the world. He only knows how to impose himself, and the more dire the situation he finds himself in is, the more likely he is to come out on top. Quitting just isn't in his DNA, so the fact that he has the talent to elevate so many valuable qualities as both a combatant and an antagonist make him all that more dangerous, even if it doesn't always seem like it. Because on top of it all, interestingly enough, despite lacking a grand motivation like the aforementioned villains, he still appears to share several of their key attributes. Don't get it twisted, Hiruhiko is one of one. He just appears to be the perfect amalgamation of what has made previous Kagurabachi villains so great. The way I see it, in a way, Hiruhiko is kind of a bit like Kyora, because they're both the type willing to give it all, even if it means going down with the ship before they even consider quitting. He's even more like Sojo in the sense that he's able to strengthen his resolve through clashing against those with opposing worldviews, and seems to have a bit of Yura when it comes to having the foresight and ability to adapt to different possible outcomes. And to me, that is a crazy prospect, because whereas Sojo and Kyora met their end, Hiruhiko has been granted the perfect opportunity to not only overcome his defeat at the hands of Samura, but also evolve past his infatuation with Chihiro. I wouldn't be surprised to see him actually despise Chihiro now, fueled by feeling betrayed, rejected, and might just truly become obsessed with wanting to break Chihiro, what he stands for, and everyone around him. Hell, I'd even say that could have been Yura's plan from the start. He intentionally chose Hiruhiko to take on Chihiro after meeting him during the Rakuzaichi, and he knew exactly what he was doing. On another note, now, even without Kumeyuri, who's to say Hiruhiko can't continue to hone its abilities just like Samura did during his time without Tobimune? He is a prodigy after all. Similar to Chihiro, Hiruhiko thrives in positions where he's forced to grow. Like we saw in the Bloodshed Hotel multiple times. He feeds off chaos when his back is against the wall. He's a student of freedom through and through, a wild animal who relies on pure impulse, pure instinct. We've seen him kill a dude with a hairpin, completely embarrass the hotel general manager and master of the Raigen One Sword style Yojiro Sengoku, and pick up the AI White Purity style like it was nothing. He's the exact type of genius Yojiro had told his pupil didn't exist. And yet, he couldn't have been any more wrong. Hiruhiko is basically 0-2 against Chihiro after the rooftop, but again, dude just doesn't know how to quit, cause despite it being his first time actually using Kumeyuri, he immediately begins to master it like Yura predicted. And despite also being innately incompatible with Kumeyuri's playability, he's able to deepen his understanding and identify a unique path to success in no time. Hiruhiko was just too ambitious too early and bit off more than he could chew with Samura. But now, there's nothing to stop him from learning from that. We're talking about the guy who also managed to mix things up with Banquet to force the same Samura to rely on Suzaku. And it's important to keep in mind that we have yet to see Kumeyuri's third ability, which Hiruhiko was tempted to use but instead opted to focus on the quality of the other two abilities. It's that kind of decision making that highlights Hiruhiko's capability and willingness to be calculated and methodical. It shows that he truly pushes himself rather than just relying on what is handed to him. See, regardless of not wielding his Enchanted Blade for nearly the same amount of time, in a lot of ways Hiruhiko has still kept up and managed to mirror Chihiro's growth. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. Like I alluded to, both have been shown to thrive under pressure, both take their greatest leaps when challenged during actual combat, and their abilities even match up perfectly. Hiruhiko's invisible blade freestyle technique versus Chihiro's all-seeing Rokuhira eyes. In a short amount of time, Hiruhiko has presented himself as a perfect match for Chihiro. It's just that Chihiro is that good, and to be fair, cause I just can't stress this enough, has wielded his Enchanted Blade for much longer. Still, Chihiro really poured salt on the wound and essentially broke what was left of Hiruhiko's spirit by not acknowledging him one bit. And Yura must have known this was a possibility. But is he using Chihiro to force Hiruhiko to grow, or the other way around? I only pose that question because how he responds to Hiruhiko's failure should tell us a lot about both characters. Yura had given him the green light to do whatever he wanted at the hotel as long as he brought back Tobimune, and obviously that didn't happen. I doubt though that Hiruhiko's recent lack of success changes anything for the Hishaku, because I think it's more important for Yura to just put Hiruhiko in these positions, well aware that he might not always come through, but knowing that the experience he gains is just invaluable. Yura had previously said that Chihiro was too green, and since then, he was killed and then brought back to life by Samura, as well as learned about the malediction and then convinced Samura to join him against the Hishaku. Hirohiko is clearly just as green in his own way, and was also just struck down and put in his place by Samura. Will this be the catalyst that forces him to take the next big leap in his development? By this point in the video, I believe I've made clear why I think such is the case. Of course, this could go in any number of ways. Hirohiko might not play as big of a role in the story again. He might just get killed by another Hishaku member just to establish them as a new big bad. Shit, I've even seen some people predict he turns good and gets trained by Uruha to learn to wield Kumeyuri. Which, I don't know about that, chief. Though I still see Yura or the Master Swordsman likely being that final big bad, I see Hirohiko serving as the last stepping stone for Chihiro, the rival that forces the protagonist to reach the level he needs to be to fulfill his mission. Chihiro has to break Kumeyuri either way, but this time around I believe he'll find Hirohiko to be the one tougher to break. He doesn't have his Enchanted Blade right now, but I don't believe that will be the case for long. I can see a scenario where Hirohiko comes back using remote activation to retrieve Kumeyuri, and goes on to use Yori as bait to distract Samura, now that he especially has eyes, to then sneak him. Maybe even hitting him back with the same "this time it's no illusion" line as the ultimate get back, really twisting the knife. This would ultimately destroy what Chihiro has recently fought so hard for. It's that type of power play that would really legitimize their rivalry and even the score against Chihiro. Hirohiko said he's the only one who's free, but he's yet to really prove it. It's kind of hard not to become invested in a villain who seamlessly hops in and out of the spotlight, growing each time, and consistently pushing the hero to lock in and be at his absolute best. That's what I hope we keep getting from Hirohiko, because in theory, it should ultimately make his inevitable demise all the more compelling. With the recent reveal of all remaining Hishaku members at the time of this recording, including a young boy claimed to be the strongest among them by Yura himself, I really wonder now how Hirohiko will fit into it all, and if he will essentially become a wild card in the story. For now, we'll have to wait and see. What do you think though? Do you have any more expectations for Hirohiko's character? Let me know in the comments. I appreciate you for watching and staying till the end. And I just want to say, I'm also grateful as hell for the love me and Tiberius have been getting over at the Hishaku Hideout podcast. So check it out if you haven't already for weekly chapter discussions on Kagurabachi. Stick around. Much love and take care. Peace.